Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Tiffany Mink, Marketing Manager for Interview Valet here, and I'm so excited to start with this topic today because it kicks off our foundational mini series that we're going to be doing over the coming weeks. Because we're really going back to the basics. Over the last few months, we've talked about more of the top tier, the higher level components of podcast guesting, like the ultimate guide to promoting and repurposing your interviews, or the state of podcast guesting that talks about trends and numbers and projections and all of that, which we shared earlier this year. We've talked about in the last couple months more targeted. We've segmented it down to more targeted discussions focused around brands and coaches and consultants and nonfiction authors, but all of that focused around people who are already in podcast guesting, who are already using it and how to finesse it and make it better and optimize and maximize. And now what we're going to do is just go back to the basics. What if you're someone who is thinking about using podcast guesting? What if you're someone who is wanting to get into it, or has maybe done a couple interviews and you're like, okay, I'm not getting this right. What am I missing here? It's for those people. And we're going to talk about the 9 secrets to getting booked on your first podcast, along with debunking 3 very common myths that's typically associated with podcast guesting. And then later, we're going to bring on another Interview Valet team member, Kristen Nolan. She is one of our amazing client account managers who very successfully gets our certified guests on interviews and makes those successful introductions with podcast hosts all the time. So I thought she would add value to the conversation of just that firsthand knowledge and experience of what she's incurred and what she's seen drive successful invitations and what deters them. So with that, we're going to dive in. And I think the first thing we should address is, why podcast? Why are they different? They are different from other digital marketing medias in that it's long form content, right? It's not a 30 or 60 second snippet on someone's social media feed. It's not a graphic. It's not, something that it's not a pop-up ad that somebody's, annoyed that it's in their way. It is a long form medium that opens up to genuine conversation and builds connection. And you really get to share your authenticity with others. You get to let them learn about you and know about you. It drives for real conversation and connection, not only with the host, but with their listeners who hopefully will later become your leads and customers, right? They're not super edited, which is nice. Again, it goes back to they get to see you for who you are. It's not this pinned up, button up thing that, it's not a 10 rapid fire questions and, you're not being grilled on your expertise. It's a genuine conversation, building genuine connection. And so with that, who is this for? What is your goal? This is for anyone whose customer requires the know, like, trust factor. This is people who, who are in high ticket sales or a high touch service, like coaches, consultants, nonfiction authors, as we talked about before. Anyone who the customer needs to really not only recognize your ability to help them and serve them, but they need to kind of co-sign on your mission and values, on what you stand for. They're coming into, if you're a consultant, you're going into their business. They really have to trust you and your heart and your goals and objectives? And does that align with their customers? So then, that comes down to, if your goal is to just get on an interview, it doesn't matter what your results are. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. You can do that. Just pick one. As we reported earlier this year with the State of Podcast Guesting report, there were like around 2.6 million podcasts. Just shy of 400,000 of those were active podcasts, meaning that they have posted an episode in the last 30 days. So if your goal is to simply just get on a podcast, do an interview, talk with someone, you can do that. Just pick one. If you want to do it systematically in a way that drives business, that drives results, that provides value to your industry, then listening further to this conversation will be valuable for you. Again, it's about doing it the right way. It's about making it scalable. It's about making it predictable, and not just throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks. And with that, what I'm going to share here today is, it's not based on opinion. It's not based on what we think is correct. We collect data on everything. We are a people-driven company backed by data. And what that means is, over the last 9 years, more than 1,500 certified guests, more than 75,000 interviews, and more than 200 million podcast listens. We've kept data on all of that. We've tracked all of that. And we've really seen what attributes to guest success and what deters it and what takes away from it. And not only from our own statistics and our own experience, we've also had the opportunity to work with a lot of high-level people, very knowledgeable experts in their field, industry thought leaders. And so we get to share in their expertise and their experience as well. And so that's really what we've nailed down, these 9 things, these tricks and secrets that we found and we have learned. And that's what I'm going to share with you here. So let's dive in to number 1. To start out, you need to decide who your target audience is. Again, we aren't just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? We want to know, who are you trying to talk to, right? Not everyone wants to hear you. Not everyone is interested in your message, in your book, in your brand, right? So you want to sit down and really, truly get a clear idea on who your avatar is. Who is your target customer? If you could create them, if you could type them up, who would they be? If you're not exactly sure where to start with that, you could start with some of your successful customers and clients that you've had so far. What things do they have in common? Are they specifically, are they a certain demographic? Do they work in a specific company? Do they have a certain type of customer? Find commonalities in your existing successful clients and kind of start there. And then the next one is to have a clear message. And this will start off, it'll debunk our first myth, which is just show up and talk. Again, you wouldn't show up to a physical stage with an audience of 1,000, 5,000 people without preparing first. You wouldn't, you would show up prepared. You would have your key points that you want to make. You would have your objectives. You would have some type of plan of how to present what you have to share. And so it's not a show up and talk. Now, while podcast interviews are not structured, there typically isn't a script. There typically isn't, you get 10 questions ahead of time. This is what we're going to say. We're not going to deviate from this plan. It is about a genuine connection and a conversation. We always say that the best podcast interviews are ones that feel like you're listening to two old friends talking at the kitchen table, right? Sharing a cup of coffee. Those conversations where it keeps you interested. You don't want to turn it off. You want to see what they're going to say next. It's about having like a genuine banter between two experts. And so while it's not a script, it's not pre-planned ahead of time, you do still want to have an idea of what the key points you want to make, the key things that you want to bring up, and make sure that who you are and your brand and your expertise is highlighted in that interview. And so with that, knowing your avatar, knowing your message, combine that then with what are your customers listening to? It's not about what you want to listen to. It's not about what you listen to for yourself to grow your business or what you listen to for leisure or pleasure, but it's about what your customers are listening to. So you want to do your research through their eyes. You can Google, what are the best podcasts for XYZ? What are the best podcasts for women in small business? What are the best podcasts for growth and mindset? And that'll give you a good starting point. Other places that we like to use are Chartable, Listen Notes, ChatGPT, again, AI, all of that has a lot of really good resources. We've done another presentation earlier. Our founder, Tom Schwab, did a presentation where he actively walked through ChatGPT and explained, detailed how to find podcasts. Or if you find one specific podcast, if people listen to this podcast, what other podcasts are they listening to that's similar to this? Google is your friend, use it. And then with that, as you're coming up with these podcasts, everyone wants to start at the top, right? We say start ugly. And this goes back to debunking our myth number 2, which is bigger is better. Nobody starts on Broadway. You shouldn't plan to start on Broadway. You start off Broadway, right? And you work your way up. It's not about your ego. It's not about, we have so many people that come to us and they immediately jump to, I want to be on Joe Rogan, right? And we're like, okay, but why? Does Joe Rogan's audience care about your message? Do they care about what you have to offer? Do they care about your services, how you serve your clients? And typically, it doesn't make sense. That's more feeding your ego rather than providing value to your industry and to your business. And 2, your first interview is going to be your worst, plain and simple. You need some time to practice that message, that you developed a concept of what that message is, what your message is. But now you need to finesse it and fine tune it. And several of our clients have come to us just for that reason. They have aspirations to be public speakers and keynote speakers, but they recognize that they need some practice, right? So start ugly, just get on some podcasts in the beginning, and eventually over time, as you build your confidence, your message, your stage presence, then you can work your way up to those bigger and better shows. And then that leads us into number 5, which is to, pick 5 podcasts to get you started. This is a good way to make it scalable, right? We talked about there's nearly 400,000 active podcasts right now. How do you pick one? You want to find shows whose purpose and message aligns with yours, whose audience would gain the most value with what you have to share. And, and this goes back to our third myth that more is better. More is not better. Bigger is not better. Only better is better. Um, and it goes back to, it's better to talk to a room of 100 of the right people than to a room of 10,000 of the wrong ones. So, just because a show might be smaller or have fewer listens does not mean that that audience isn't better for you and and your audience and what you have, right? Um, now, you're picking your shows, right? We've started with 5 shows that make sense, giving our status of just getting started, whose audience aligns with our message, right? Now that brings us to number 6. Avoid the awkward mass-produced email. Don't be a robot. Avoid the robo pitch. Um, you know, don't start out your email with, "Hi, Thomas. I hope this email finds you well," right? It's an ongoing joke. Our founder, Tom Schwab, real name Thomas, he does not go by Thomas. Anyone who knows him, who's listened to him speak, who's listened to his interviews, knows that he goes by Tom. So right off the bat, he knows immediately it's a spam robo email when he gets something that says, "Hi, Thomas, I hope this email finds you well." Right off the bat, you have lost them, right? Before you've even had a chance. Maybe you're the best guest that they could possibly have, but you have lost them. So there's a few steps that you need to do between finding their podcast and aspiring to be on there and to actually reaching out. And the first one is to follow them, to find them on social media, subscribe to their podcast, give them a rating and review, listen to a few of their interviews, comment on their social media. If they share an interview, maybe they had another guest that's very similar to you. Comment on that. Hey, Tom, I really enjoyed that show. I love how they said XYZ. Because podcast hosts, oftentimes, because they care about their listeners and they value their listeners, they work very hard to gain their listeners and to keep them, that they often are pretty good about keeping their ear on the ground with their social media, with their ratings and reviews. And so what's going to happen is, if they see that you're interacting and that you're following them and that you've left them a review, then when my email comes through and they're gonna be like, "Oh, Tiffany, I recognize her. She was commenting on my social media the other day." They're gonna recognize you, and kind of, it's not just a cold call, right? Because now you've started the steps to building that relationship. Because it really is about a genuine connection. A lot of people think that it's about just the interview, right? There's no before or after. It's just, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this interview. I'm going to spend an hour and then be done with it, and it's going to magically transform my business. But the reality is, there's a lot of things that need to occur before and after the interview. So when you start to view it as the start of a long-term relationship, that's where the magic really happens, so to speak, that your interviews will start making bigger and better impact in your business, because they're built on a genuine connection and not just, I picked your interview or your show out of a hat, and I just want to interview on there. So many times our clients have told us, their best and most favorite interviews over the course of their podcasting careers are often the ones where they still have a relationship with the host. And I think that's by no mistake. And, another tip is to tack onto that is, oftentimes, if you are a good guest and you do have a really good chemistry with the host and have a really good, nice flow of a conversation, oftentimes you will get an invite back, later down the road, which is usually really great if you're someone who is typically, coming up with new products or courses or books. You may want to go on that podcast again next year when you're launching your next course or your next book or your next program. So these are just another tips and tricks to keep in mind that you may not consider as you're starting out. Now, the next step into leading up to making that introduction is having a professional one sheet. Most podcasts are not trained journalists. If you send them a 10-page media kit, nine pages are probably going to go unread, right? For one, people are busy, and two, you don't want them to sit there and have to decipher between all of this information to see what you have to offer and why they should bring you onto their show. That we have developed this one sheet template here, and it's something that we create for all of our certified guests. And this is really based off of years and thousands of host feedback. They want something that is simple, clean, and easy to read with, the key points that they need to know about you to decide that you can provide value to their listeners. That's all they need to know. They need to know your entire life history. They don't need to know if you live on a farm, with 20 acres and are married to your high school sweetheart. They just need to know the facts of why it's relevant for you to be on their show and to share your message with their audience. So now that you followed them on social media and you've started to build that relationship and you're engaging with them online, and you have a professional one sheet that's clean and easy for them to read, now we can talk about sending an introduction that they'll want to read. You've done your homework, right? Now it's time to make that introduction. You want to have your nice clean one sheet. And then, you reach out and again, avoid those, "Hi, Thomas, I hope this email finds you well." You want to be real. You want to find ways to convey your uniqueness and what you bring to the table and your personality. Because the truth is, podcast hosts work really hard to gain and keep their followers and their listeners. And when they bring a guest on the show, they're putting trust in you to share you with their hard-earned listeners. So oftentimes the best interviews are friends. Your friend has a podcast, you get on there. Friends of friends, or people who you aspire to be or to aspire to be friends with. Again, it's not about a cold pitch. It's the common thread here is like genuine connection and the start of a relationship. Okay, so now you've sent your introduction, and then we get the awkward no response, right? What do you do? The reality is hosts are busy, and oftentimes they have other roles outside of their podcast, outside of hosting their show. They typically have a whole other facets of their business. And then also, in the industry, there's typically months that are more busy than others. There's times that they tend to be booked out further than others. We often see there's kind of a lull in the summer because people are enjoying their summer. They work hard all year and they're enjoying their summer breaks. And then we'll see an uptick of a host looking for guests in the fall as they're then kind of building out their schedule and calendar for the rest of the year. So there is a flow there. So just get a polite follow-up. And our rule of thumb is once a week for 1 month. That's just enough to kind of, hey, I'm getting in the top of your email list, just following up. But then also, if you haven't heard from them in your last 3-4 emails, then maybe cut your losses and move on to the next. It may not always be a great fit, or it may just simply be they're busy and you're not right for them at this time. So that's kind of how we deal with the polite follow-up, and when to keep it going and when to move on. And then next we have a bonus tip, and that is host no other host. You really quickly can develop a reputation of being a good guest or a not so good guest. And the best way to get on more interviews and to do more interviews is to be a good guest. Let's see. Am I still here? Let's see. I might be having a connection problem. It looks like I lost my camera. Okay, there I am. I don't know if you lost me on your end, but it said my camera went away. So I am back. So yeah, to come back to this one as that host, no other host. One of our pro tips that we suggest is after the interview, after the recording has ended, and you're wrapping up with the host, ask them. So, hey, I really enjoyed my time here. Do you know any other podcasters like yourself that I could bring value to? And that's valuable for a couple reasons. For one, it shows that you enjoyed your time with them, that you appreciate them, and that two, you want to try to branch out and help probably their friend, right? Because host no other host. It goes back to that old Fabergé organic shampoo commercial. And they told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends. And that's really how you get started, is to go on a few podcasts and then to expand and branch out to the other podcast host that they know. So with that is our 9 tips plus a bonus number 10. And we have also debunked the 3 myths associated with podcast guesting, which is bigger is better, more is better, and that you just show up and speak. And so with that, I know that was a lot. I felt like I ran through a lot there. But with that, we're going to pop over and see if there's any questions. And then I'm also going to bring on, as promised, our client account manager, Kristen Nolan. She's awesome. Like I said earlier, she helps with getting our certified guests on shows and making those introductions. So I think she will be able to give us some great firsthand insights. So let's bring in Kristen.
Hey, everyone.
Hi.
How are you, Tiffany?
I am great. How are you?
Good.
Thank you for hopping on with me today. Like I said, I thought, I'm talking about it on the conceptual level, but you do this day in, day out firsthand. So I thought you could really add to that conversation. Is there anything that I maybe missed or any notes that you have?
I think one thing that I try to tell my clients is find what makes them stand out. So as an example, when you were talking about the bonus tip, I have a client that after each interview, he goes and picks out a book for the host, not one that he's written, but just a book based on the conversation that they've had. And he sends just a personalized thank you note, letting the host know he enjoyed their time. And then, this personalized book. So I feel like just finding ways that make you stand out amongst your competition or other guests are a really great way to show some additional value to the host as well.
Right. And showing that you're going that extra mile, right? That you're not just sending out robo pitches, that you're taking time to consider a book that they might, it probably takes them 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
Or them 10 minutes, but it still shows that you're invested in it, that you're interested in it. You're not just, oh, I'll try this out and see if it works.
Yeah, it's not transactional. So one of the values that we have is that relationships are the ultimate currency. So
Mhm.
I found that clients of mine that have the best results are the ones that really find a way to connect with the host, and they don't look at it as I'm going on a podcast to sell something. They look at it as I'm going on a podcast to share my experience, and to share what I have to offer, and it'll resonate with some of the listeners. So I think it's really just having that mindset that it's a relationship, and that you have the ability, like as you mentioned, to network and things like that. So you're able to build a connection there that lasts well beyond just that initial hour meeting or whatever. So
Right. Yeah. And like I said, like a lot of our clients have said, their best interviews are ones where they still have a relationship with that host, right? Because you're sharing more. It's not just a 2-minute clip on TV. You're spending probably, after it's said and done, an hour or two with this person. If you do like a pre-interview meeting, some follow-up work,
mhm.
you're really spending time. And to 45 minutes of conversation, you can get a lot in there. So you're not just bantering. It shouldn't be this awkward thing. It should be like a genuine conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree. I think and some hosts will actually have kind of like we call it a pre-call, where they can kind of meet and get to know each other before hopping on the interview. And I actually think that's great because it allows you to find a way to connect with people, right? So I always say people do business with people they like. People have relationships with people they like. And so it offers an opportunity for you to really connect and get to know each other and each other's background. So it does feel more like an organic conversation between two friends versus a scripted, show.
right. Yeah, I can see how the pre-call would be beneficial to get those awkward, you
Mhm.
know, how are you? Where
Yeah.
are you from? Kind of things out of the way. And another thing I talked about, and I think you would be able to give great insight on this. We talked about making that introduction when you finally done your homework. You're making the introduction to the host to get an invite on their show. Is there an ideal way to reach out to host? Is that via email, social media? What's been your experience?
So I think the first part of the answer is I think it really depends on what the host preference is. Obviously, like some people may be on LinkedIn, but they don't check their LinkedIn messages, or maybe you email them and they're out of the office, or different things like that. So I would first start by trying to figure out the way that the host prefers to be contacted. But one other point that I would also make is that so some of my clients will have larger social media following, right? So I have a client that has, over 150,000 followers on TikTok. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily a way to communicate with hosts per se, but I think if you're able to highlight, say you have 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, then I would highlight that as well in the introduction. And then I also would advise this. So we call it an introduction. We don't call it a pitch. So we're introducing you. We're not pitching you, right? So we want to make it about a connection versus, hey, here's someone that we have. Would you like to have them on? That's very transactional. When we're making introductions, we're highlighting various things about that client. So it would be like introducing someone to a friend versus, hey, this is what I have, the used car salesman approach.
Right. If you think about if you're at a party, right, and you want to introduce two of your friends, right, that maybe don't know each other, you wouldn't just say, hey, here's this person. You would say, hey, Susie really likes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, bicycling too, or she's a runner too, just like you. You would find a common connection to kind of give them a jumping point for that conversation. And And that goes back to it not being a cold call, but it's really about trying to find somebody that you do have something in common, similar interest with.
Absolutely. And I know you had mentioned the one sheet, but I think it's really important because, in the business world, we look at our resume kind of, when we go out, we use our resume as a point of reference. When we're having hosts take a look at the one sheet, we want to make sure that it's reflective of your personality, right? And that, you're highlighting your accomplishments, but you also have topics that are of use to that host. So if your background is in marketing, but you want to go on a show about moms, you need to find a way to help the host connect those two dots. So you want to make sure that you're not just, as you said, throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping it sticks. It's really finding a way to connect and allowing that host to see value to their listeners. That's really how you get that invitation. It's not just simply I'm, sending out a bunch of emails and hoping that I can get on a show. It's really targeting the specific show that's going to be beneficial both to you as a guest and also to the host and to their listeners as well.
Right. Yeah. We often say that, the best guest makes a host look like a genius for having you on. Right. That it naturally makes sense. Like, oh, wow, I'm so glad they introduced me to this new person, or, their new ideas or what they have to share on this specific topic. Like you said, if it's for moms, something that resonates with that audience, a mom who's come up with a new concept of time management or, managing stress or whatever it may be. Yeah. And that goes back to being human. And like we talked about, I hope this email finds you well, and avoiding the robo pitches and different things, because it's about getting on the right shows. And something else we talked about that I think is important is the target audience as well. You and I talked the other day about like faith-based and explicit shows, and like Joe Rogan. How many people have come to us and they're like, "Can we get on Joe Rogan?" And we're like, you can, but why? Does that make sense for you? Does that make sense for your audience? I think you dealt with that, correct, a few times.
Yeah. So part of our process here is we ask, are you comfortable with faith-based content and are you comfortable with explicit content? And the reason why we ask those questions is to make sure that the shows that you're going on are going to align with your brand of your company, right? If you're the CEO of a corporation and you're answering to a board of directors, is he going to want to see you on Joe Rogan? Sometimes different things can be polarizing, or, people can make assumptions based on a very limited amount of information. So it's really critical that when you're making these choices, that you're choosing shows that are going to reflect your brand and your company in the best light possible. So just taking those into consideration when choosing shows as well. I know for me, when I'm going through potential shows for my clients, I also take into consideration like personality. I've had a client in the past and his topics were a little bit more dry. And he said, it's less important about the topic or the targeted audience. And it's more important about the connection that I have with the host, so that I can take this topic that may not be super exciting to people and I can make it fun and exciting. And so that really offers you kind of a blank canvas in terms of what you're looking to accomplish with your target audience and your goals. And there's different ways to do that. So each client has something different that they need that you're able to go through and sort through, so that you make sure that, it is mutually beneficial for a conversation between the host and the guest.
Right. And like you said, with Rogan, I mean, we use him as the example. There's lots of crass or maybe polarizing podcasts out there. We've seen it where if you're a publicly traded company and you have, like you said, board members or stockholders to consider, you got to keep that in mind as well. I saw something the other day. This guy was talking about, he's in the industry, and he just simply made a tweet that said he liked Joe Rogan, and that he lost, I think, like 30% of his followers on that platform within like 48 hours or something. And he's like, I didn't say I subscribe to him. Like, I don't co-sign on his beliefs, but that is something else to keep in mind. And I think that's why it goes back to the earlier points of, defining who your target audience, who your avatar is, your customer is, and, finding shows that align with that, and matching your ideal customer with their audience and their listener and their values.
Absolutely. And, I've actually had a couple of clients say, I don't want to be I don't want to be a guest on shows where the host may be a competitor. And I always tell them, like, this is an awesome opportunity. People do business with people they like. And so if you're going to go on a show with 2,000 listeners, that doesn't mean that all 2,000 of those listeners are clients of the host, right? So it's an opportunity to get together with someone that would be on a similar level, a peer or a colleague, and have those conversations and challenge each other. And maybe your case studies or your personality resonates more with those listeners, and they want to reach out to you. So just because someone may be in the same field, or you may look at them as a competitor, there's room at the table for everyone. So don't count those out. Those are actually great opportunities, I think, for growth and for an opportunity to really provide yourself the ability to be a thought leader in that space.
Exactly. I think that wraps it up here. Kristen, thank you so much for hopping on with me. I feel like that was so valuable. Again, just your firsthand experience in doing this really gives some insights, right? Again, I can talk about it conceptually, but you're the one who makes the magic happen for Interview Valet. And thank you for sharing those little tips and tricks with us as well. So with that, thanks for hopping on with me today. All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Okay, that was so great. I'm so glad Kristen hopped on with us. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. And just to talk about what's coming up. As I said in the beginning, this is kind of kicking off our foundational series here of really the basics of podcasting and podcast guesting. We talked a lot about a one sheet today, and that it should be clean and professional. And actually, so next week, we're going to talk about the key components of a killer podcast one sheet. So we're going to break down all of those that I showed you earlier on Tom's example and the one sheets that we put together for our clients. We're going to go through and break down each of those elements and what they are, why you should have them, and why they're important with the reader in mind, being the podcast host. After that, then we're going to go into the podcast guest equipment, right? We're going to talk about, so you've got your one sheet, you're going to get on a show. So let's talk about having the right equipment to show up and sound like the expert that you are. And then later on, then we're going to talk about the podcast interview welcome page, how to turn your passive listeners into active visitors to your website. So all of that is coming up. We will be doing these mini episodes each Wednesday over the coming weeks. So look out for those. And until next time, take care.